Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, if you have read the story, you may be having some feelings right now. If you have not finished reading the story, I highly recommend you go back and finish. I think we can have some really interesting discussion about it. Okay, so let's talk about this new strategy called questioning the text. So, in this box, working from the text that you see in the springboard, we're going to look at this as a strategy for helping us understand, helping us analyze and break down a text so that we can look at some of the complex themes and literary techniques and concepts individually to break it down and make it a little bit easier to understand. So, in questioning the text, what we do is we break it down into 3 different levels and we ask some questions to dig deeper. So, a strategy for thinking actively and interpretively about your reading is to ask questions during and after reading. As you read any text, you can ask questions that aid your understanding with different levels of ideas. Questioning helps you experience the text in depth, gain information, and monitor your understanding. It's also going to help guide some discussion. So we may have what we think is an understanding, and so then we want to pose some questions to others to kind of bounce our understanding off of them and clarify and get some validation and just help deepen our thoughts on what we think is happening. So let's look at the different levels. There are 3. The first is literal. It is something that I can literally point to in the text, black and white. Literal questions can be answered by referring back to the text or consulting references. So, for example, which child picks his nose in the story? Kinda gross, I know. And the answer is Ravi. Okay, so, and we know this, it's kind of the first thing that jumped off, out of the story at me was that reference to when he does that. That was real easy. I can flip back and tell you where that happens. It happens in paragraph 19. It says, Ravi heard the whistling and picked his nose in a panic. Right there. So level 2 helps you dig just a little bit more deeply. So look at level 2. I'm going to scroll up just a little. These are interpretive, meaning that they call for inferences because the answers cannot be found directly in the text. However, textual evidence points to and supports the inferences. So these are questions that would make us go back and look for different pieces of evidence with which we can draw a conclusion. Okay, so for example, why is Raghu able to triumph over other players? Now, I can go back and look for evidence, right? So I'm going to go back, and I remember Ravi talking about him. Here it is. It's in paragraph 19 as well. It says, Ravi hadn't had much faith in his short legs when matched against Raghu's long, hefty, hairy footballer legs. And there are some other references as well to Raghu's abilities, if you will. So, but I think that's the primary one. There are some others. Let's see. I think that's the most. Oh, here we go. The deafening or despairing scream of one of the girls as Raghu bore down upon her. So this idea that he's running really fast to catch the girl and getting closer and closer. And so, between those pieces of evidence, I can make a conclusion that, one, he plays soccer. So that's the footballer reference. And he has strong legs that allow him to run fast. And so Raghu could win over some of the other kids. So that might be an interpretive answer, a conclusion that I have drawn. So I would answer this by saying Raghu is able to triumph over other players because his legs are stronger and he plays soccer. Okay? Now, level 3 questions are universal. The answers are not in the text. So universal questions go beyond the text. What are the larger issues or ideas raised by the text? So in other words, what do they make you think about or feel, or how do they relate to other stories, the outside world, society, the community, a larger theme, something that we are thinking of that we cannot point to in the story? So here's an example. What theme is expressed by the last line of the story? He lay down full length on the damp grass, crushing his face into it, no longer crying, silenced by a terrible sense of his insignificance. Wow. Thinking about that, there are many right answers to this. Okay, so just because you're not thinking what I'm thinking, and I haven't told you what I'm thinking yet, doesn't mean that you're wrong. So what themes take into account not just what's in the story, but also what we know from our experiences in life. If you have ever felt like Ravi, where you were the kid who didn't win, the kid who didn't get picked to play on the dodgeball team, or, maybe just the kid who liked to be alone instead of being part of the larger group, then maybe you understand this theme intuitively. Maybe you've not ever been that kid, and so you're not sure where this is going. So think of other stories or movies or other things that you know from your friends or hearing about it at school. So I am thinking, he's not crying anymore. That's an important part of that sentence. And I can remember being the kid in school who I wasn't a runner. I had asthma that was induced by exercise. So people didn't want me to run the relay with them during PE or be on their team if it involved running. And there was a point at which I just stopped being upset about that. And I stopped crying about it and realized that that's just the way life was. And life was going to go on no matter what. No matter how much I cried, life was going to go on. So I sort of see that. It says that no longer crying, silenced by a terrible sense of his insignificance, that it doesn't matter. The kids have gone on without him. They're playing anyway. Even his mom says, stop crying, stop being a baby. Just get over it and go play. So that idea that you don't make a difference, and sometimes we think about those things. And, we know that's not true. And yet, as a child, we often fall into the trap of still believing that, right? So I think that this could be a theme for this story, that life goes on without you, whether you're there or not, whether you're involved or not. Life is going to keep going. All right, so that's levels of questioning. Okay, and they help us get at the deeper understanding. Now, we are going to have some discussion that's going to require you to write some questions and bring them to our synchronous sessions. So if you're in period 1, you're going to need to have them ready for Thursday. If you're in periods 4 and 5, you're going to need to have them ready for next week. So our first synchronous session next week. So look at number 6. Review the questions you've already responded to in this activity, including the making observations and returning to the text questions. Identify which level each question addresses. Then look through any questions you have asked yourself and classify those as well. So just as an example, when I go back to the making observations, the first question asks, what characters do we meet in the story? Well, I can go straight to the different pages and read their names and tell you who they are. So that's a level 1 literal question. Okay, so go back and take a look and practice identifying what level they are. And then come back to number 7. Number 7 says to prepare for a group discussion, generate 2 level 2 questions and 2 level 3 questions about games at twilight. The level 2 questions should guide your group through the process of making inferences based on evidence from the story. So these are the kinds of questions that you have to draw conclusions that are not written in the text, right? So thinking about, here's a little bit of this that I know, and here's a little bit of this. And so now what can you tell me about that based on the evidence I've pulled out of the text? So 2 level 2 questions. And then I also want you, and there is a Google Doc in the classroom that you will need to turn in that does this activity. So please make sure you're putting your questions and then your response and evidence that is the answer to that question in the Google Doc, and make sure you turn it in so that you get credit for it. We are going to use those questions in our discussion, and that's why you need to be able to answer it yourself so that it can be part of that discussion. All right, so the 2 level 2s and then the 2 level 3s. And so in the instructions it says, the level 3 questions should lead to open-ended discussion about the themes and universal ideas present in the story. Record your questions and your initial responses to them in the following chart. Okay, so this chart is in a Google Doc. The level 3 questions should really come beyond the text. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of one. I am thinking about what I read in the About the Author box, how she writes about family. It said that, I'm going back to the About the Author box. It said that in her work, she explores how gender issues are central not only in the family, but to the nation as well. And so I'm thinking a little bit about the interaction between the mom and Ravi at the end, and what that has to do with maybe some gender roles or how we expect our boys to behave. And so I'm thinking I could form a question around that. But then it also says that she believes that her characters often show signs of heroism and strength simply by surviving everyday life experiences. So I'm also thinking I could formulate a universal level 3 question about a couple of different characters that I read and how their life experience, as told through this story, might have an impact on who they become later in life. So those might get you started on writing some of those level 3 questions. Number 8 really just talks about how to prepare for our discussion that we're going to have when we come back into our synchronous sessions later in the week. So you are going to share your questions with your partners in your groups and then come back to the whole class and we'll share some together. All right, so hopefully that will get you started on writing your levels of questions. And that should do it for this video. All right, you guys, remember this is a 4-day week, no school for you on Friday. So have these ready for the Thursday synchronous session and then next week. All right, we'll see you in class. Bye, everyone.